Welcome back to A Billion Realities. This is your host, Jessica. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today on the show, we have the ultra-talented writer, director, producer, cinematographer, editor, music video, and filmmaker, Gerald K. Barclay. Gerald is a true creative visionary and has been in the hip-hop game since the late 80s, with his early music videos kicking off many hip-hop icon careers, starting with Wu Tang Clan. In addition to music videos, Mr. Barclay's 30-plus year career continues to thrive with numerous powerful documentaries, short films, and feature films. Gerald has created music videos with No Limit Records, as well as for artists such as Wu Tang Clan, Snoop Dogg, Master P, Maestro Fresh Wes, Bounty Killa, Mystikal, Big Pun, Skratch, Heather B, and the Gap Band. Gerald Barclay is also known for his film and documentary work such as Fatima's Revenge, Bloody Streetz, Killa Hill, The Bully, and Wu, the story of the Wu Tang Clan, winning him a few honorable awards along the way. Gaining his early filmmaking experience on the set of Abel Ferrara's King of New York and Spike Lee's Jungle Fever, Gerald's career and life story are fascinating. Today, he will share never previously released insight into the adversities he has faced in life, the hip-hop scene, the entertainment industry, and what it takes to be resilient. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
Thanks for having me on, Jessica. It's been a long journey, of course.
Amazing. It's so great to have you on. So tell our listeners where you're joining us from today.
I am in I'm in a suburb north of Atlanta, Georgia. I've made this my home for the last 16 years now, believe it or not. Time has flown.
Wow, it has. So you've had a fascinating journey and career. It's such an honor to have you on the show today to tell us all about it and to allow us to get into that creative mind of yours. So your recent film is now out on Tubi TV. It's called Fatima's Revenge, and it was intense. Can you tell us a little about that film?
Fatima's Revenge is the latest installment of me going and doing a lot of independent projects. I remember watching the news one day. It was some clip that came on YouTube, and they talked about a family that had they had literally a Ku Klux Klan museum in their house, and they went in there and they found all these things. I said that would be kind of interesting. What would happen if we had a movie project about that? It just so happened that a good friend of mine, Musa Sisse, had contacted me and wanted to do a short film. So we did a short film about a lovable grandfather who basically had all these deep secrets, and we decided to tell a story about people who seem to be innocent. And that's one of the things it touches on, because through one of the characters' eyes, that was just a lovable grandfather, but to our protagonist in the story, that was a nightmare because he had homicidal tendencies and he was racist and so on and so forth. So I drew from the incident where they interviewed these people who had the KKK museum in their house and nooses hanging on their porch and all these memorabilia from back in the days So it was interesting just to do a film about that. But that Fatima's Revenge is a long journey that obviously we're going to discuss how I got to this point in terms of my career. Definitely.
We're going to go backwards in time, absolutely. But, it's crazy. I did not know that backstory, and I've seen the film. Even I've been to the screenings, and I didn't know that's where the inspiration came from. So that's very, very interesting and shocking.
Yeah.
And scary.
So it's No, it's the reality of what it is, because what happens is I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and every now and then I would check my hometown papers, like to see what the latest news is from Staten Island, because it's kind of closed off. And you have these incidents of where people, let's say an innocent person gets shot, and then you see the comments underneath there where you have all these respectable people, but they're anonymous, but they'll go on there and write all these nasty comments about, people that are in minority, and and you were like, wow, is this the same America? And these are people that you see them every day on the bus or in the hospitals or in the courthouse with their smiles on, but then they have these deep-rooted racial hatred for, blacks and others. So I just wanted to tap into that a little bit, and and like I said, it comes across. A lot of people see the depth of the film, and I basically, this stage of my career, I started shining a light onto things that most people run away from. So I decided to dedicate my talent and skills into telling these type of stories.
You're so right. I had a guest recently that touched on a similar topic down in the Carolinas, very, very near you. And, you're in Atlanta, and he was doing a film about the Holocaust, and it was a similar situation. He was asking a very, religious man, for some help on his film, and the guy asked him, "Are you a Nazi?" And then when my guest said, "Of course not," he said, "Well, I can't help you, and I got to go to church now." Can you believe that?
Oh my goodness, that's deep.
Yeah. So I completely, can understand what you're saying. Like I'm hearing more and more stories like that, especially down south. But anyway, not to divert too much off of our topic.
It's a great way to start.
It's
a great way to start the conversation.
Corroborating evidence.
No, it's happening. It's happening. It's a different time, and I rather know what the reality of it is and how people really think and feel. So this way, you don't walk around looking at life and think that it's a different way. When Obama became president, there was a huge group of the population that was very, very happy that, you had somebody stepping in and taking us to a whole other level. But then you had a group of people that was like, oh, no, that was their worst nightmare. That you had a real African-American leading this country. He did a pretty good job. I mean, compared to where we are now, obviously, So, yeah, so let's take it back to the very beginning.
Okay. So, I want to talk about you growing up in Park Hill, of course, in Staten Island. That area has some pretty major history in itself. So what was it like growing up in Staten Island?
And in all fairness, when we were living back in the 80s, I moved there in 83, and I was, what would I have been? I think I was going on 15 at the time, 14 going on 15. And there were certain things, obviously New York is New York. It's always going to be a rough city, so we came prepared for that. But, and the first few years, I must admit, was very, very nice because we had a small African community that was there. And we also had this burgeoning hip-hop that New York, with the New York backdrop. So you had, guys like Kool D and Grandmaster Flash. These are the OGs of hip-hop. They were sort of starting out. I mean, they were like the ones booming at the time in the early 80s. And I remember, running around and it was just beautiful. It was, we connected with a lot of kids. We were able to move around. The buildings were like so gigantic. We had, I don't know, maybe 14 buildings, and they all had, 6 floors on each. You can go to the roof, you can go to the back, you can do all these different things. And it was phenomenal. And, connecting with the early stages of the Wu Tang Clan members, it was funny because, the first job I had, I remember, RZA's older brother was my supervisor selling newspapers on the Verrazano Bridge, and that was such an interesting time because it was innocent, but then there were a lot of elements. As you got older, you got a chance to understand it a lot better, which dealing with, being a teenager and cannot find work, while kids from my neighborhood at the time, they were trying to do something those restless summers. They had summer youth at one point, and then they got rid of that program, so the kids had nothing to do. But I sold newspapers on the Verrazano Bridge. Actually, I bought my graduation suit that year to be able to go to high school.
Wow. So what were some of your earliest memories with the Wu Tang Clan, you know, growing up around them and just seeing them around the neighborhood, like some of the earliest memories that you have?
I remember because we moved from Providence, Rhode Island to Staten Island. When I got into Staten Island, like '83, we got a chance to, I had a class. I was in the class with both Inspector Deck and Raekwon, who were from my neighborhood. So we all had classes together. That's my first early memories of them. Like I told you, King, which is RZA's older brother, was my supervisor. When I graduated with Power, You God, all of us graduated from IS 49 and went to high school. But when we got into high school, we split and went to different schools. Gano Grills, these are all guys that I came up with at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we share that connection.
That's amazing. So what were some of the later memories that you had interacting with those guys, and what were the neighborhoods like in the 80s in Park Hill?
Like I said, there was an innocence that was there. We had a lot of block parties. We did a lot of stuff in the neighborhood, and sort of there was this innocence because when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, you're running around, you're playing sports, you're staying outside as much as you can because the apartments were bigger than the average New York apartment, but it's still an apartment. So who wants to be in a one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartment? So any chance you get to go outside, you go outside and play. And obviously, you had some kids that were rough back then, and there were some other kids that basically were a little bit older, and they were involved in certain things. And basically, what happened is those were like the last couple of innocent summers. I remember having a fight, tied us all together later on. I remember, the African kids in that neighborhood, we used to all, walk to the, soccer field together to the playground, and we'd all be in a group. And I remember some guys saying, "Hey, you, the African posse." I'm like, okay. So we all stopped. And, so they challenged us to a fight. They thought we were a gang because we were, walking together. I think it was like 5 of us. And they were walking also. So they, and that's the gang culture in the early 80s. The gang culture was kind of fading out, and there were graffiti everywhere. Everybody had like a hip hop name and, graffiti name or whatever. Anyways, people were breakdancing all around the area. So I remember this group of guys walked up to us and, challenged us to a fight. Since I was the oldest out of my group, I got designated to be the one to lead the fight. So, we started fighting. I jumped up and we started fighting, and basically this guy was much bigger than us, even though we were, all 14, 15 at the time. This guy was a lot bigger. And the irony is that guy, in the middle of the fight, because I had just come from Africa, so I was used to kicking. And I remember, him pulling a switchblade out on me, and we all took off because we never expected him to pull out a weapon because he got frustrated that I was kicking him and not letting him get close to me. So the same guy's son ended up murdering DJ Megatron from BET some years back, and I'm actually including that story in my new documentary. Yeah, so it's very interesting.
I remember that.
Yeah. So it's very interesting.
So you're from Liberia, and now that you just mentioned it, I think that's an interesting story as well. So what made your family make the transition from Liberia to the U.S.?
Well, the interesting thing is there was a coup that happened. I remember, my last name is Barclay, and the Barclay is a prominent family because 2 of them were presidents of Liberia. For those that do not know, Liberia represented a free nation for blacks all over the world who didn't want to be enslaved to go there, and they formed this nation in 1822. This is pre-Civil War, and they led the country. My family, the Barclays, immigrated to Liberia in the late 1890s from Barbados. and within 20 years they had served as presidents and top positions in the country. So the name is very prominent in Liberia. And in 1980 there was a coup, and the coup kind of was spearheaded against all those people who wanted to take the country to the next level. So ended up eventually leading to a civil war that clashed between the American Liberians, or those that came there, and the indigenous. Or so I thought, and some years later I found out it was a lot deeper than that, where the actual cause of the conflict in Liberia was because the president wanted to use his own currency and do business with other people, and the American government and the CIA had him assassinated and spun it into, it's deep. Like I said, as I got older, there are a lot of things that I learned. That simple fact is, you don't want any competition, so you kill off anybody who wants to stray off. It's like a jealous boyfriend who, because the girl wants to break up with him because he's a cheater and he's, secretly a killer, all of a sudden he goes and tries to kill her because she doesn't want to be his. I mean, you can just make it as simple as that.
So it's pretty interesting that you came from Liberia. You were still pretty little. You were what, 10 or so when you came over?
No, when I got here, I was 12. Yeah, when I got here at 12, at age 12. Yeah.
And so I know you moved around a bit. I think it was Texas, then Rhode Island, and then you ended up an island, around 14. What was your first initial, love of hip hop? When do you remember hearing it and being like, wow, like super connected to it?
It's funny. When I first heard a hip hop record, I used to live in Houston, and I had a cousin that came to visit, and he basically, back then it was a lot of funk music, and you had, everything from Brick House, Diana Ross, or Michael Jackson, some, authentic Michael Jackson being played on the radio. But a lot of the music that young kids listened to was everything from Ring My Bell to Brick House, and those type of records were playing on the radio. And my cousin came in and he sang, or he rapped the whole lyrics from Rapper's Delight, and he rapped it like he was the actual rapper. I'd never seen or heard anybody do anything like that, and I was blown away. And he actually, he was the one that first introduced me to hip hop, and I was fascinated by it. And some years later, I found out. Obviously, when I heard it again, I'm like, oh my goodness, I thought he did it. Hearing the lyrics again. But so when we moved to New York back then, like I said, it was fascinating because you might hear one hip hop record, maybe once or twice a day on the radio. So we had our tapes ready, ready to tape it the minute it came on, so you can, play it back later on. Everything from White Lines to Jam on It. All those records were big back in the early 80s. And then you had movies like Break-In, and then Crush Groove that came and really just set everything off. And I think this is all mid 80s, and then the hip hop culture just never looked back. It just became the force of the youth, for the last 40 something years. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely just continued to evolve from there. So I know Park Hill was a pretty rough neighborhood. I mean, I know you had a nice childhood and there were a lot of good things about it, but I know that you went a lot of drug dealing, violence, there was a lot of crime there, murders. So that said, after high school, what made you want to go to college, even though you did all of that?
Well, let's talk a little bit about what happened. Obviously, when, you're talking about the mid 80s and, 86, 87, crack was introduced, and it just changed the whole dynamics of everything. And, people that were innocent in the neighborhood, just getting by, now had hundreds of thousands of dollars available to them like that. And they did some of the most unspeakable things. So, but all I thought was that crack epidemic only hit New York or my neighborhood, not knowing it was echoing every urban center around the country, California, Chicago, Detroit, Florida, you know what I'm saying, Miami, Atlanta, all those areas were all affected equally by it. And as you found out years later, the CIA was responsible for bringing crack and selling it into these black neighborhoods. So time is the ultimate revealer of the truth for some reason. And it seemed like there are certain things that you don't know what's happening now. Like we're dealing with the COVID. 10 years from now, we're going to find out the real reason we're experiencing what we're experiencing. Yeah. So it's interesting. And because of the internet now, it's a lot easier to just get information, whereas back in the day, you had to wait 20, 30 years to find out the truth. You know, if you Google it, somebody's out there talking about it, you know. But, yeah, so once that whole situation happened, you know, there were a few people that were able to dodge the whole crack epidemic. I mean, I knew a lot of people who were affected by it, but I also knew that it was a game changer in terms of everything, and you have to stay focused. One of the great things about growing up in the housing projects is knowing there are certain people in the community that protect you because they know, okay, you're doing your thing. We don't touch that guy. He's going to go to school. He already has a talent, because I showed by then, you know, I have my video camera, and my job was to document the neighborhood, you know. So I was like the neighborhood storyteller in terms of just capturing all of those elements. And those things came up in my first documentary. Well, not the first documentary, but Killa Hill was a documentary that I released on that neighborhood. And it kind of chronicled what happened. And it's probably one of the best telling of the history of a neighborhood, to show how it went from this innocent sort of community of people with low income, and then which spiraled all the way up into the crack epidemic, and then the rise of Wu Tang, and eventually, you know, settling to what it is now, which it's a, you know, African community. Is one of the largest community in the United States that are inhabited by Liberians.
Mhm. So I'm glad you touched on that topic, because it shows, you know, how it started out when you were a kid. You had a pretty, you know, fun and healthy childhood. You played with your friends. You were outside all the time. And then, you know, this crack epidemic hits, and, you know, obviously it turns lives upside down. So it's just amazing to me that you were able to avoid that. And what about being a director called your name?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the journey to becoming a director. I remember I really wanted to go to NYU, but it was such an expensive school at the time. And then I got word that there was another school that had a program in there, and you had access to all these high-end equipment. Those things are all obsolete now, but at the time, I mean, those were, you know, just having access to 3/4 machines and editing and all of that stuff. So I decided to go to school for communications. One day while I was at school, there were some people casting for a movie called King of New York. They needed some background extras for some club scenes and so on and so forth. I was like, I want to work in the movie. I want to work, you know, in terms of behind the scenes. So they gave me a number. It's like, call this woman and you can get on. I called her. I went and I worked. I started doing my internship on a movie called King of New York. And for the hip hop heads, Frank White was a character that Biggie Small used, and it ended up being like a hip hop classic. Not as much as Scarface, but it's one of those gangster movies where you had Wesley Snipes, Larry Fishburne, and a whole bunch of people in that movie. Christopher Walken, and so on and so forth. So my first experience on a movie set was being around people like that, and just, you know, doing runs from the office, going on the set maybe once a day, seeing these scenes being shot, and so on and so forth. It was fascinating. And while on that movie, a guy named Giancarlo Esposito, actor who would then go on to play in Breaking Bad as Gus, he gave me a number. Gus gave me a number and said, "Hey, G, you should call this guy. You know, Spike Lee does a program every summer where he takes students. You should go ahead and check him out." So I called, and they said, "Come on down." I went down there. There's a guy named Monty Ross who was one of Spike's producers. And they had like an internship program where basically we came and we worked. So I took the summer off. I mean, I took a semester off of school to work on Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. So, you know, my first couple of years, I jumped in majorly because I got a chance to really meet a lot of people. I got a better perspective of the film industry and, you know, realized that I was going to school for communications and there was a whole other world out there. I got a chance to meet all these big name people. I met a guy named Russell Williams who had just won an Academy Award for doing sound on Dances with Wolves. And, you know, you had Ernest Dickerson, who's like a renowned cinematographer and director. He went on to do a lot of Walking Dead stuff. He also directed Juice. And like I said, it was fascinating because all these people, and Ruthie Carter, who won an Oscar recently for doing the costumes on Black Panther, these are all people that I was around and being able to see how small the black film community was because those people went and worked on all these different movies. They had just come from working on Mo Better Blues, and I think right before that they did New Jack City. So it was a small film community, but I was like, okay, well, I need to go back and finish up my schooling and start doing my own movement because basically what I realized, all of the people that were around Spike were people that he got out of school with. You know, they all going to NYU and all these different schools together. So he put together a nice little team. And that summer, right before I worked on King of New York, two of my friends got murdered, and that was a reality check for me. So it's like, damn, you know what? It's time to get serious because you're not going to live forever. So I, you know, kind of dedicated my production, the GB Productions, to them and decided I'm going to do them as much as I could. So I started my production company, and I started doing these little music videos and doing a lot of videography work at the time, and just to kind of get my feet wet. And I, you know, because what was fascinating was the fact that I met all these filmmakers that came from Howard University. There's a guy that came from South Africa to work on the movie, so we got a chance to really get connected with people. So, but at the same time, I knew Spike and I were not going to be buddies. Because it's just of the hierarchy, yeah. So I decided, well, I'm gonna be my own Spike Lee. You know what I'm saying?
That's amazing. That's
so I ended up going back. Yeah. So I formed a team. There were some young guys that were in school with me. We were going out and doing work. Because I had purchased my own camera, I was able to do filming outside of school because in the school you have to go in and reserve equipment and. You know, he can do it a week and a half. It was just too much. I was like, well, there's too much going on for me to predict what's going to happen, so I need my own camera. And the footage that I used for that camera eventually became my Wu Tang documentary because by the time the Wu Tang were ready to go and they were in the studio, I was there with my camera capturing some of those moments with them.
Right. Okay. So let's just back up for 1 sec because I'm so curious. So you're on the set of all, you know, of these major films with Spike Lee, with Abel Ferrara. You know, what was the word on the street back home? Because that's pretty huge. You were really young.
Yeah. This is it's funny. I remember that summer, and a friend of mine told me the crazy story where I had this car, and right before I went to work for Spike Lee, my alternator went, but I knew the opportunity was too great for me not to go, so I literally would have to drive to work every day. I owned like a Toyota Corolla. It was a 5-speed, so I was like, you know what, I can go work, but then I'll miss out on this opportunity. And Spike was really cheap back then, so he wouldn't pay the interns. So I was like, you know what, hell with it. It's worth it. So I did on the film, but I would drive my car to work every day, and I had to park on a hill or on some sort of an incline. And the crew knew when we wrapped, it was time to go give G a push because I could jumpstart the car to be able to go home. Yeah, so I had, so it was a running joke. You know, but it was a very interesting experience. Imagine being there when Halle Berry got her first acting experience, or being there when Samuel Jackson was a recovering, drug addict, and it was his first shot of acting, playing a character that he had just spent the last few years being addicted to crack. being able to see all of that. And the great thing about what I did at the time, I worked under a great leader. The guy who was the props master, this guy, Kevin Latson. Kevin pulled me under his wing, and, so I worked in the props department. And what that enabled me to do is to be on set, almost at all times. I was very observant to all of the stuff that was going on. So every scene of Jungle Fever, I was standing, no more than 10 feet away watching all those scenes being shot. And I was like, okay, I see now.
Powerful. That's powerful.
Yes. You got to be all in the right place at the right time.
Unreal. So did that trigger kind of your credibility in some type of way, with the Wu Tang? Because I know that you started shooting their music videos around the same time.
Yeah, it would be some years later. Because, like I said, I knew the family because Divine, Mitchell Diggs, and I think we went to junior high together. So we all sort of knew each other. And when the word got out that I had taken a path down that, a journey down that path to be a filmmaker, there were a lot of people that approached me, but I was still in my training stages. And a lot of times, like, my thing is, if I'm not comfortable, I won't do it. So people, were like, hey, it's because they did the first video, Protect Your Neck, and the guy who did it never finished it, and they were very pissed at him. So they had to go and finish it themselves. That's how it came out the way it did, but I thought that was classic because they, certain things they didn't know, like you can't show time code on the screen, or certain things you couldn't do. Some stuff is shot in video, some stuff is shot in film. Whatever it is, they managed to finish it. And they didn't, RZA had, like, mentioned that he didn't want to make that mistake again. So I remember him giving me the number to call the guy because there was some 16 millimeter film left over. And when I called the guy to say, hey, I'm supposed to pick up the film from you, he was like, who the hell are you? I think RZA must have owed him some money. Whatever it was, like, he didn't even know his other video was completed without him or whatever it was. So I just remember the guy talking to me that day, and he seemed pretty shocked that we went on to do the next video without him, which was kind of interesting. I wish I could remember his name, but he basically shot the video and didn't finish it, and they ended up finishing it up on their own. And then the next phase was, okay, well, let's give G a chance to knock it out. So the B side of Protect Your Neck was, making a lot of noise. And I remember Method Man and my brother worked at the Statue of Liberty, so I always ran into him in the neighborhood. And so he was friends with a lot of people. Like I knew him from passing, but he always said what's up to me, the fact that he knew all the people that I knew. And once I found out that he was the artist that the song was about, and I was like, oh, that's a nice guy that's always saying hello to me. I said, no doubt. So we went ahead and did it. People, in the neighborhood, his name was Shaquan at the time, so everybody knew Method Man. I mean, everyone in the neighborhood knew him as Shaquan, so I went to shoot the video. And it's funny, I was looking at some footage the other day about when I went scouting for a location to shoot his video. And we chose a spot near the ferry, and we set the date in, I think it was July of 1990. Was it 92 or 93? My mind went off. Yeah, it was 92. So we shot the video. No, it was 93. 93 July, we shot the Method Man video. And I remember we shot the first day, and then I got a call when I was on my way to shoot the next day that my wife at the time, her mother had a heart attack, and I had to run to the house because she was babysitting my daughter. When I got there, she was lifeless, and they were, trying to resuscitate her, and she eventually died. But I had to make a decision whether I was going to go and finish up the video or take off. And that was a big decision that I had to make at the time, is, whether I was going to be like the other guy that didn't complete the video. You know what I'm saying?
Wow, that's intense. Yeah.
Yeah, but I decided to do it. I mean, it caused a lot of strife, and it brought some pain in the relationship because I was young and I didn't really understand at the time. That was one of several decisions that I had to make in my career, whether I was going to give into the profession or give into my personal life at the time. So I finished up the Method Man video. It was well received. I actually co-directed it with another filmmaker that I connected with, a guy named Rich Williams. and we tackled it. I did a lot of the cinematography. I remember finishing up the video, and we sent the first cut in, and and I remember the notes that we got back from Raekwon was, "Yo, why does Meth got all the screen time? You know, it's our video. How come?" I'm like, he's the only one rapping, you know. So that was the only blowback I got from the Method Man video, and I remember him saying, "Whoa." You know, it was his first time being shot in a close-up because I had this big wide-angle lens, and I was literally about a foot and a half away from Method Man, and so he's in the camera, and you got a chance to see how much of a great performer he was and how handsome he was. So based on that, the song became a hit. I mean, it was big time. And then after that, I got a chance to do another video for another up-and-coming group called Illinois Skratch. I did Where's My Homies for them, and that was another classic. And then RZA called me and was like, "Yo, GB, MTV wants another version of the video because there's too many guns and blunts and all of that stuff in it. Can you shoot another one?" I'm like, "No problem." So this is when we paired up and did The Mystery of Chess Boxing and Method Man back to back. So we shot those two videos on the same budget, and we're able to get it in the can, you know, very little money too, because most of the budget went to the chess boxing, and then a little bit we did used for, you know, the Method Man video. What's interesting too is all of this stuff wouldn't have happened if I didn't come across Liberty Studios, and that was like the craziest situation I could tell you a little bit about too. So Liberty Studios basically was this this haven, you know what I'm saying? Like I graduated from college. Okay, let's go back a little bit. So let's take you to the beginning of 92. 92 was my last year at, you know, for my communications degree. And there were some classes that I had to take because, you know, I needed to take those classes. And I had to do another internship. And I did an internship right down the street from my school. My school was on Chamber Street. And about 2 blocks up was Miramax Films.
Wow.
So I did an internship literally outside of Bob Weinstein, which is Harvey Weinstein's brother's office. I worked for his assistants. And, you know, if they needed photocopies made, or if they needed me to run to get some lunch or do whatever. But so I literally stood there for the 2 months or so that I worked at that company. I always looked like I was doing a delivery, and I was the only black guy standing there. And that was the most interesting thing. So prior to coming into Liberty Studios, I worked at Miramax. I interned at Miramax. So I got pretty much a really good experience. I remember, you know, being there and just photocopying dozens and dozens of scripts and, you know, not knowing my way around, but it just shows you how, you know, much of a sharp community it was. And one thing I will say, those guys were never in the office. I think I met Bob Weinstein once or Harvey once. I think Bob was the big boss. Harvey was a little bit under him. He was around a few more times than Bob Weinstein was, but people were terrified. I remember no one even entered his office. You know what I'm saying? It was like he was there watching, and people were terrified. You know, and I spoke with the lady, the receptionist, or this woman, the 2 girls that ran his, you know, were his assistants at the time. I connected with one of them recently. I think she lives in California now. So we just talked about how crazy it was back then. This is all pre-Me Too era. You know what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
I need to have another conversation with her to talk about how that whole thing. But so I was desperately trying to find work, you know, after I graduated, and I couldn't find work. I'm like, what the hell? I applied for a camera operating position at like New York One News was just starting at the time, and they never called me back. And, you know, I'm like, damn, what the hell is going on? Anyways, I decided we had a communications class in school, and there was a woman in there who basically, I had to drop a tape off to her, a VHS tape. He said, "Oh, I should bring about my job." And I went to Liberty Studios. I walked in there in, let's say, May, June of 1992. And the backstory was I had a kid on the way, so the pressure was on even more because I wasn't working. I just graduated from school. And, you know, we had a kid on the way. And it was like, oh, my goodness, what am I going to do? The good thing is I used to promote parties on the weekends, so I made a little bit of money from that. But I went into Liberty Studios, and I saw it to be a treasure chest of filmmaking. You had access. It was a huge library of films to research. You had access to film cameras. You had access to animation. You had access to, editing, post-production. You had a small sound stage. When you look at the Method Man video, all of those things are in there. The opening animation was done right downstairs by a buddy of mine, David Bruce. We did the editing right all in-house. The sound stage is what we use for our scenes from the thing, and the rest of the stuff we shot on location in Staten Island. You know, Tony Lover, pulled out and got me a 16-millimeter camera, and that's what we used to shoot all those early videos back in the day. We got an Arri S, and that was the beginning of the filmmaking career of GB.
Amazing. So that was when you filmed the Method Man, METHOD Man video and the Mystery of Chess Boxing, right?
Yeah, all of those videos were shot within that, say, 1 year period. We shot from July 1993 to 97.
Wow.
Let's say summer 97, we went back to back with a whole bunch of videos, and, everything from the Mystery of Chess Boxing to Illinois Skratch, Heather B. There's so many of them. We did videos for
Big
a guy
Pun.
named Nine. We did, Big Pun came later. That came with the No Limit years. That came after 97. Yeah, in 96, I started going down to Florida doing projects. People, like back then, it wasn't like now where everyone had basically, if you had you had a film camera back then, you were king because those cameras are so expensive. It's not like now where you can go to Best Buy and get yourself you go spend $500, $700 and buy yourself a DSLR and you're good. This day is much, much hard. It's easier to get gear. But back then, only a few people had access to the type of equipment that we had. So it was very interesting.
I'm so curious. So, you're filming all these videos with Wu Tang, and you're getting a lot of behind-the-scenes footage as well. What gave you the foresight, to capture all of that? Did you get a lot
I'm
of
going to say it is. One of the interesting things is the fact that I'm able to so you got the hip hop world, and that was crazy at the time. So this is Biggie and all these guys being around. So because I had a camera, and I used my tax money from 1989 to buy my own video camera, and for my community and be able to get practice, I used my video camera for it. So when I wasn't, so there were certain things I would learn in the videography world that I apply to my regular cinematography world, or just being a video director, and vice versa. So some really interesting things that I learned shooting film and so on and so forth, I'll bring it over to my regular video world, because I still have people hiring me to do birthday parties and weddings and those things. And they both helped each other because the madness of being in the hip hop world at the time, I was able to get away from it. So there's nothing more pleasing than, not being on a hip hop video set where it's blunts and guns, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Then going into going and doing a wedding where it's the most memorable day of somebody's life, So I was able to balance those two things out. It actually worked out pretty well, like I said. So it was like my relief. So being able to have access to that camera, and that's one of the things I will say that I wish I had done more of, because I've made more money just revisiting the footage of certain things that we did back then than I ever thought I would have, just because it was like, wow, you know, somebody's willing to pay you X amount of dollars per second for that. So I'm on a list of people that they call whenever they're looking for archival footage from that era of hip hop back in the, you know, in the early 90s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I would have done more, because once you have a 2-hour tape in there, you can go and film forever, you know. So.
Definitely. So you had a span of, you know, from what, 93 till 97 that you worked pretty heavily with Wu Tang. What came after that?
Well, in between Wu Tang and No Limit, I eventually got signed with Master P's film production company. And how that was crazy, because I used to do videos. I used to get calls to go, and I went down to Miami and I directed I produced a video for another filmmaker, doing some videos for Trick Daddy. And Trina was one of the actresses that we used, so we used her in the video, and then we used her in another video. So I connected with Ted Lucas from down in Miami, and he was really supportive. And I found another extension of Liberty Studios, which was a rental house down in Miami called Supergroup. And I connected with those guys, so they made me a part of their team, and I was able to bring some work through there and get certain things going. So I remember getting a call from Divine and say, hey, we got the new album ready. I need you to come and document some of this stuff for us. So I went back and started filming some scenes from, you know, just some recording sessions and interviews and so on and so forth. So we ended up going and doing they took me on the road with them to Hawaii. That's how I ended up getting all of that footage. You know, flew out to Hawaii. They asked me to produce the It's Yours video, but they wanted me to grab footage while they were on the road. So I got a small camera crew, and we hit the road and went out and, you know, went to Hawaii, did all the, you know, 4 islands in Hawaii, and then we went to L.A. and shot the video. When I went to L.A. for the first time, it was with Wu Tang in 97. It was really interesting because I got a chance to connect with some people, and I loved it. And I was like, yo, I'm going to come back and do some things over here. And sure enough, a year later, I was signed with No Limit, doing music videos for Master P. I ended up doing a total of about 20 videos within a 1.5-year period. And that was like what really tested my skills, to see that I was able to do that. And what brought me to No Limit, believe it or not, I had written, I did a Killa Army video, which someone at Universal liked, and they asked me to come and write a treatment for a new group that was coming out with Juvenile, which ended up being Cash Money Click. But I ended up writing the concept. I didn't get the video, but the video commissioner at the time liked what I did. She liked the work. So when an opportunity came up, this guy named Dave Myers, who's like one of the top video directors, he went to do a movie with Master P. And in order to fill in the slot of doing video, they brought me in to do some Master P videos. And P probably had never seen a young black guy being able to do similar work as these white guys that he was working with. So he was like, okay, well, I'll give him an opportunity to do more then. So we ended up doing everything from It Ain't My Fault to Hootie Who to videos with Tyson Beckford, Mia X, all the different groups. And it was interesting because for the first time I was able to have decent budgets to do projects. So, you know, I'll come up with an idea, write it down on paper, they put me with a dope producer. Producer pulls everything together. And believe it or not, it all came together.
Incredible. So do you feel that hip-hop has kind of shaped you as a person over the years?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And I'll say this because I remember coming back, right? We were doing like these big budget videos. Back then, that was like, you know, nothing was under 125,000, you know what I'm saying? You got these big, big videos, you know, what people use to shoot movies now, you know. You know, and I remember a guy saying to me, I remember a guy saying to me that, wow, gee, you know, you're so powerful. You can put something in a video and influence the country. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He said, yeah, you can start trends and you can do whatever just by putting it in your videos. I never really saw it that way. I was like, you know what? And it's very, very interesting. And basically, that's when I realized the power of the medium that I had. I remember how a teacher told me that I had a mass media class while I was in college, and he explained it, but I didn't really understand what he meant at the time. He said the same thing too, mass media, it's a very powerful tool. And I didn't understand. At the time, I'm trying to figure out what it really meant, and it didn't occur to me until that person said it after, like I was doing so many videos, I didn't have time to see them. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Because we were going back to back. Yeah, for that 1.5 year stretch that I was signed with No Limit, I went ham, and I basically, just kept it going. And one day I woke up and I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I was doing stuff that I didn't really like. The money was there, but I didn't really, feel I was making any kind of a statement. The projects started becoming monotonous. But, like I said, the money was there. But there were certain things I wasn't connected with. I wanted to really go back. And I loved doing New York hip-hop videos, even though there were less money, but I needed to come back and work with some people. So you mentioned Big Pun. That was one of the things I did. I convinced P to let me come and shoot a video in Times Square with Big Pun and one of his Mr. Serve on. So we did the video NY to NO. We shot that right in the middle of Times Square. And at least I was home. I got a chance to do another video with the Cocoa Brothers and Bounty Killer and Nona Hendrix. We shot a video in New York. So it was cool. So I was able to, start doing stuff. And then I convinced P to get out of LA. Let's go to Miami. So we went down there. We shot a few videos down. We did Bounce That Thing, and we did Ice on My Wrist. We did that video over there as well. So it was, like I said, it was interesting because we were able to move around and do things on a different level that I really, truly liked what we were doing. But I really, like I said, there was something more. I needed to connect even more with my culture and my roots. So I eventually left LA and came back to New York. I didn't finish up my whole year and a half. I came back to New York and I started working at a .com. It's a company called Heavy.com, which fascinated me because it was a whole different world. You had these young kids running around with these mini DV cameras, but they were able to get some fascinating footage, and I loved it. So they were paying me decent money to basically teach, just supervise and oversee some guys using, the cameras and stuff. And I inspired them to keep doing their thing, and eventually that led me to an opportunity to go to Africa. Now, I hadn't been to Africa since the coup happened 20 years earlier, 1980, and here it was 2000. A production company, a music studio in Africa invited me to come down and take a look at the hip-hop scene in Africa. And I was like, why not? And I brought a guy.
I just wanted to ask this. So at what point did you get the itch to go there, or was it presented to you and then you thought it was a good idea, or had it been on your mind already?
Not really. That's what I'm saying. These guys called me and was like, hey, why don't you come? Because I used to produce hip-hop content for Heavy.com. So I thought it would be interesting to add an African twist to it. Here these guys in Africa, and I wanted to kind of tap into the roots of hip-hop, which is the beat. So I decided, let me go down there and see what they're doing. These guys are rapping in a foreign language. I didn't know what the hell they were saying, but it was fascinating to me. So when I went down there, I just reconnected with the culture. So even though I didn't make it to Liberia because the war was still going on, it just fascinated me because it brought everything back into perspective. So I adopted the phrase or the quote, depart not from the path which fate has you assigned.
Incredible.
You understand? So, so you're going down this path and you get sidetracked and you're like, okay, I got to get back home. When I got there, I realized what the purpose was. So what I did was I ended up extending my trip. So, I didn't come back right away. I ended up staying there a little longer and started teaching these filmmakers. These guys didn't know the technology that I just discovered, which was a MacBook Pro and a digital camera, automatically put you into the driver's seat to be a filmmaker. And you didn't need a big camera. These cameras work very well in low light. So I was fascinated. So I showed them what they could do. I gave them all the programs that they needed. And these guys ended up becoming like some of the top filmmakers in the country because they had the necessary tools, And
Wow.
basically, yeah, after going back, several times, they were on their own. And obviously, I never went back. Now, after going back to, to what do you call it? It wasn't long after that I decided to follow that Africa path was bigger than the .com. Not only that, the .com world had crashed and people were damn near jumping out of windows because it had changed. And I just didn't feel that climate anymore. So I decided, let me just continue down this other path, which was my connection to Liberia. So I started archiving the early footage, which would become The Love of Liberty, which was a documentary focusing on me traveling back to Liberia. I ended up interviewing a guy named General Butt Naked at the refugee camp, and that just spun me into a whole different direction, to try to get to the source of the conflict in Liberia and, get me to understand things that which I didn't know when I was, a kid leaving there. I was 12 years old, and they pulled us out like, hey, you're going to get on a plane and go to America. So it was a different situation at the time.
Who was General
so yeah,
Butt Naked?
General Butt Naked was one of a few interesting characters that I came across. General Butt Naked was a Liberian, like a warlord during the Civil War in Liberia. He basically believed in supernatural powers, and the way you do it is by taking off all your clothes and fighting butt naked. So he was one of the fighters that went out and, fought the war butt naked, and he was, with the spiritual guidance. Interestingly enough, he was a pastor. He was a big Christian pastor living in a refugee camp at the time, which I thought was fascinating. So I had several conversations with him. I came back to the United States, continued filming. I eventually went back to Liberia to complete the documentary, and I ran into him there again. And we ended up, he brought a really interesting perspective in telling the Liberian Civil War story about conflict and what led, these people to take up arms to fight. So it was fascinating, and a lot of people came back. The documentary was well received. It got nominated for Best Picture at the ABFF, I think 2005 or 2006 ABFF. We didn't win, but it was the only documentary nominated in that category. So it was powerful. And I got a chance to really just understand the power of doing my own projects. One of the things I will say is I don't regret the music videos that I did, but I realized all of the resources and all of the things that I had, how many things I would have done if I had a chance to even split it 50-50. For every music video I did some of my own thing,
Right.
Which would have been even more powerful because the music videos, yes, the song is hot for a few months and then that's it. But when you do your own projects, they live forever. I did The Love of Liberty. I started filming that thing in 2000 or January 2001, if I'm not mistaken. I think I started filming that documentary. And someone, last week called to order a copy of it. I think they wanted to see it. So it's very relevant because it told the story at the time. Yeah, you were able to follow me in this journey, and I'm actually getting ready to do the same thing again for another project, part 2 to my Killa Hill project. I'm going to do it, a similar way. You know.
So how important has
So
it been for you in your career to create projects that leave a mark, that have a meaning, you know, that change the narrative in some type of way?
you know, it's very important because what happened is you think about, you know, let's say rap, hip hop music, right? Was a very, very powerful tool. Like most of the genres of music that were generated or created by black people in this country, they were created to be a voice to say stuff. The blues, jazz, and all of these forms of music, even rock and roll, expression. Somewhere in there, somebody comes in and say, hey, we can sell, you know, 3 times more if you keep it on this. You know what I'm saying? Like the gangster hip hop, which was a really interesting genre. I really loved it myself. But there has to be a balance. And what made maybe the 90s interesting is you had a wide range. You had everybody from Queen Latifah to NWA all out at the same time, 2 Live Crew, but they were all selling music in their own ways. Now it's almost everyone's exactly the same. I remember, you know, guys like Souls of Mischief, Wu Tang, Bahamadia, you know, and all these different groups from LA, even groups from Miami were all out at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Now it's streamlined because everyone sounds exactly the same. The reason what I'm saying is back then people could say stuff. So you can come and do a conscious rap, you know, talking about self-destruction or black on black crime, which is one of the videos I did for a guy from New York, from Staten Island also. Or, you know, so you had a wide range of people doing hip-hop records that said something. Right now, it's very hard. They talking, but they ain't saying shit. Basically, what they're talking about is my this, my that. I get high. This is how many girls I screw. And they mention every brand name. You know, hip-hop was based around that, but it was a balance. You could hear KRS-One, you know what I'm saying, at the same time as, you know, a Cool G Rap or a Big Daddy Kane. But Big Daddy Kane didn't rap about material things. He didn't say my, you know, $500 belt.
There was a deeper message in a lot of the earlier.
And I believe there was
rap.
a conscious effort to silence those people, because the power of the hip hop verse is very, very powerful. And they're like, okay, well, we need to shut these guys up because they're speaking up against this and that. And there's some people that are talking against war and so on and so forth. So there, you know, whether they know it or not, there are people behind the scenes trying to silence them. They make one phone call to Leo Cohen, and he can shut a lot of people down, and you know, so on and so forth. So a lot of people who worked with these guys didn't realize there was a whole other agenda. Because, you know, I used to be fascinated. Some of the records, you can hear the word nigger on it. But if somebody said Jew on it, they would edit it out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see because I think I remember like a Ice Cube record that he talked about that. Or certain things like, so they were behind the scenes editing what they didn't want hip-hop to say. You understand? So consciously in the background, they were controlling it. You know, and that's, you know, one of the things. So I figure, you know what?
No, I was just going to say, you know, when, you know, you have a certain group of people who are putting out actual aware, conscious, intelligent messages in their music, it reaches the masses. And, yeah, that's going to be silenced, you know? So,
yeah, I mean, you know, what it is basically, you know, it's funny. I think it was 86 or 85. Run DMC did a record called My Adidas. That was the beginning of the commercialization of hip-hop, because that one record took a brand and made it a household name, and they realized the power of it. So they push the fact that millions of young kids are listening to these records and they will hear Versace, 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 Versace on a record, and all of a sudden everybody wants a fucking Versace. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or my, my Bugatti. Everybody now wants to go buy a goddamn Bugatti. It's funny. I saw a couple of last year or so. This dude survives the car accident with the Walmart truck, and one of the first things he did when he get his settlement is go buy a $2 million car. Are you kidding me? You know what you can do with $2 million if you invest it properly? Do you know what will happen if you buy $2 million worth of real estate or put $2 million in the stock market? So anyway, it baffles my mind that it's right in front of them, but a lot of them are not even understanding how they can take advantage of the
platform that they have.
The power of the medium. Yeah. You can stop things automatically. You know how Martin Luther King didn't have the platforms as they have now. Imagine what he would have done if that platform was available to him. He probably wouldn't have died because he could just get on YouTube and deliver his messages. He didn't have to get on a bus and risk his life to go to all these different places. So these guys have the power. Cardi B might get on. There'll be 20,000 people, 100,000 people listening to her, talk about her vagina, It baffles my mind. It's the truth. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's the truth because I feel that, no one sat these people down to explain to them the power of the medium and what they do can shut certain things down or be able to propel it into a whole different level. But the ones who are being allowed to speak are the ones that are standing and talking the most crap. I remember, like Two Live Crew, they were like the bastardized group because the stuff they were talking about, was strip clubs and, I did this to this woman and, you know what I'm saying? Right. But now that form of hip hop has become the norm. It's like, like guys make songs specifically for the strip clubs now. You understand? So it's interesting to see how it's traveled from me hearing that first lyric from my cousin, Robert's Delight, to now where you can barely even understand what these guys are saying. And some of the stuff is fascinating, though. The music is great. One of the things that's dope about it is these producers are producing pure hip hop beats where there's no samples. So no other group is coming and taking money from them. They can sit and produce a simple beat on their computer. Similar thing that happened in the film and video production where these guys are walking into Best Buy coming out with a $900 camera or a $700 camera and a MacBook Pro, and they have the ability to create. But 99% of these people are filming stuff that makes no sense that can even be used for anything. Like I used the medium that I had to tell stories and be able to inform people, whereas, they're, using their cell phones to film fights. You know what I'm saying? Put that on. Oh, my goodness.
That's what I was just going to say. There's different types of artists, right? There are those who will be a puppet because they want the fame and the money. And then there are artists who are creative and they want to spread a message. And that's a big difference between like old school hip hop and, what's become popular now is the industry has puppetized them, and a lot of them go along with it. They're okay with it because of that, unfortunately, But I know what you mean though, because some of them, they don't have good messages, per se, positive messages, but they have great beats. It's like an uplifting sound, or you know what I mean. So it flies, but the lyrics, like you said, it's mass programming, kinda, But
and it's craziness, and then the effort to silence other people. You understand? So they go out of their way to shut other people down, and there's algorithms that they use to not let other people be heard. I mean, they got filters on YouTube. I have videos that I did, and I may post a video on my channel, 1,000 views. I wonder how that is. exposure is not there, it definitely isn't there. So it's just interesting to see how, even back behind the scenes, there's still a certain level of control.
Definitely. It's a shame that it's like that, but, it has become, with internet and just, like you said, the algorithms, there's a lot of control going on, unfortunately. What is the biggest challenge?
The good thing is technology is going very fast, so hopefully we'll be able to beat them at it, because if someone gets shot, you can take that footage and within seconds it could be seen, or within minutes it could be seen all over the world, and we'll have time to they won't have time to really go and censor it in any sort of way. You understand? So, if you see a cop shooting, so someone films a cop shooting it, and I'm sure it's been done many, many years. So if somebody showed up at a police station here, there's a videotape that shows a cop, or a surveillance camera shows a cop shooting somebody and then sticking a gun. That never made it out before. Whereas, now you can film it on your cell phone. Bam, it's on the world. You can broadcast it live while it's happening. So that's what's fascinating about it. So they just need to know about the power of that medium and how they can take full advantage of it.
Okay.
And by doing so.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, speaking of the power of the medium that they have, I really wanted to talk about The Bully, and that was a really powerful project that you did using your ability and your creativity and your platform to do something really positive. Can you tell us about that project?
Yeah, The Bully was one of the passion projects, because when I look back at it, not only did I not make any money, I ended up losing money working on that. So I connected with some people that wanted to shoot a music video. And the funny thing is, I actually connected them with the producer to put the song together. And once the song was ready, they sent it to me, and I heard it. I was like, wow, this is powerful. And it was so well written. I said to myself, like, wow, I need to be able to tell a bigger story than just, a 3-minute music video, because the song was so vivid. So we decided to do it as a 20-minute short film. So I brought a writer on to do a script for my homegirl out in California, Ugani Williams. She banged out a nice script for the project, and I connected with a community organizer in Staten Island who had some young talented kids she was working with to come on as a producer, and we did The Bully. And so far, I don't know how many awards it's won, but it's won a lot of awards. Last I counted, I think it was like 5 awards.
Amazing. I was going to mention that as well, and it deserves.
Yeah, it's award-winning short film. Yeah, it's a powerful film, and what's crazy, we're in the middle of doing that movie, and then Hurricane Sandy, or what they call it, Storm Sandy, hit New York. And we were filming, and all of the areas got destroyed, and I had to do some pickup shots. And I remember, that was my first time I met Obama, or not met him, but his helicopter landed in the field outside of my high school, Newdorf High School in Staten Island, and I was able to, be within, I'll say 20 feet of him. That's when I knew the power of what he was doing, of what he was capable of doing, and yeah, because of Hurricane Sandy, he won the second election because of how he handled it and how he was able to bring the country together and went to the aid of all of those states that were devastated by that storm.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a disaster. I remember that very clearly. And I remember putting storyboards together for The Bully with you back into 2011 or 2012.
Well, one of the backstories is this young lady got a chance to work with me on my first feature film, and has been an instrumental part of the growth of me, because I can always call and, run concepts by you, and just overall maintaining a relationship, so on and so forth. So it's been a really good thing, and I'm glad to see that you're doing your thing with the podcast. And now this is a medium that is slowly taking off. More and more people are doing podcasts and so on and so forth. So it should be.
I think I lost you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
oh, okay. You're back. Sorry, I think it just cut out for me for a sec. Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure being able to help out with different things over the years, and I learned so much from you. So that's
and when we were filming The Bully, this young girl actually committed suicide from being bullied on Staten Island. I remember she liked the boy, and the boy took advantage of her and filmed her having sex and put it in the schools, and she was so embarrassed that she jumped in front of a train. And I think I dedicated the bully to her.
That's so tragic. You know. Wow. I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
That's so awful. So let's go back again.
It's been an interesting journey. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you know what? I just wanted to touch on, what triggered you to do your first feature film, which was obviously Bloody Streetz, because we didn't touch on that yet. That was actually your first full feature, correct?
Yeah. So what happened is everyone that goes down the music video path eventually wants to do a movie. That's what Fast got us into it in the first place. We all watch movies and we love movies, and we want to, keep things moving. So I ended up connecting with the guys that invited me to go to Africa, and we formed a partnership and started doing projects. They were willing to come in where Heavy.com was no longer a part of my growth. I ended up connecting with them, and there was a project. That project originally started as a short film that was going to be done at Heavy.com, but they once they kind of started flaking out, I decided, okay, I'm just going to keep going. And they came in and they funded the project, and it ended up working out very well. Bloody Crisis was the original name of the movie, and I wanted to touch on this whole violence in the neighborhoods, and especially gun violence. So the movie centers around that. There's this young lady in school that got sent out to do a project on it, and she was how we were able to enter this world of a hired killer in the neighborhood who is hell-bent on revenging the death of his son, but he becomes a hired killer. And, back then we didn't have a big budget, but we were able to pull it together. And that also won some awards, and, I was able to do the film festival circuit. We ended up getting a deal with Artisan Artisan Entertainment through Barnholtz Entertainment. And it was in Blockbusters and all these different places. So it kind of worked out. It was a great film. Obviously a lot of the stuff has changed now since then, because we shot it in 2000. So when I watched it, I watched it a couple of years ago. Everything's from the cell phones. That's how you can tell when you look at what cell phones they're using. Everybody, used flip phones back then, and that was like, state of the art if you had a flip phone. So it's still enjoyable, but it's distracting, the fact that you see that it was a different time.
Absolutely. So looking back on your career, you were literally in the midst of a lot of the artists in the hip hop community on the rise. Did you know it at the time?
Oh yeah.
You felt it, right?
No, you can definitely feel it. Yeah, you can feel it, because, like I said, from the first time I heard Rapper's Delight, there was something about it. It was rebellious. It was raw. It was also just fascinating in the sense that you were able to, be a part of this movement, and just to look back and say, wow, you know what? Hey, I did my part. And when people find out that I did some of those videos that I did, or just the fact that I did a very solid documentary on the Wu Tang with very little money, I was able to make my mark. And some people were like, how is this guy able to do a feature film back then, or even be able to do ones such as Fatima's Revenge now?
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, but it's all part of that hip hop experience where you make something out of nothing. These guys didn't have anything, and they made something out of it.
Absolutely.
Just up in the studio, you be able to tell your story, and that's how it happened. Because most of those guys now don't even do music; they're in the visual medium. They do movies and television. Look at 50 Cent; he's all about being a television producer right now.
Right. Times have changed, but people reinvent
And that's one of the
themselves.
things. I'll be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but not only that, the how can I best describe it? If you look at how can I say it? If you're a musician, it's almost like you're being pimped. The way, and I learned this history back in the day. This is the origin of. Back in the day, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. He was, his company. Like, if anybody needed to be recorded, they had to come to his studio to record, so you can hear him on the gramophone, whatever they had, the wind-up one. So he had this opera singer come in. That was like the most popular opera singer. He tried to get this guy to come in and record his record, but he wanted to sign him to a record deal, and the guy said no. So Thomas Edison blackballed him from ever being recorded. They were able to record him so they can play it back on the gramophone. So he was the first Suge Knight of his day, where he strong-armed people into signing a record deal with him. And the way the industry is set up, most of the artists get screwed. How can an artist like a Michael Jackson, who sold hundreds of millions of records, owe Sony, you know what I'm saying, or a Prince?
Mm-hmm.
So the way the industry is always set up that the artist is the one that gets screwed the most. These guys make money, or the way it's set up, it's the illusion of money. But then, when the dust settles, you no longer have a record deal and you're done. But if you look at some people who have nothing, they'd rather do that than nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the risk that they take. But now that guys are shifting into being television producers and movie producers, it's a whole different ball game. Everything I've done, I own. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Smart.
And that's the great part about it is, you have to call me, whether you want to use some of my archival footage, or you want to screen my movie, or you want to license my movie. You got to come to me to do that, and that's something that's very powerful. I may not have millions of dollars, but I own my own intellectual property. No one owns it.
Right.
That's
smart. So if looking
course.
back on your very lengthy career and amazing journey, if you could do anything differently, what would it be?
I think I mentioned it earlier. I think, like I said, I would have thrown the balance off a little bit and done. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, say you're rapper XYZ. You come to me to do a record, to do a music video. I had access to equipment. I can do some dope visuals to your song. My cat took a dump on the ground, and I have a $75,000 car. My talent is limited to that. You understand?
Yeah, definitely.
But if I want to do a movie about racism in the United States or deal with gun violence in the United States, I can tell a story from beginning to end and have total control of what's said. So my work, some of the videos and stuff that I've done, because I did some booty shaking videos and stuff, it may not have been indicative of who I was as an artist, but in order to, pay the rent or pay the mortgage, I was limited to that. So I would have spent a lot more time creating my own projects, so this way more of my voice could be heard, as opposed to just images to somebody else's voice. And half of the time, it definitely ain't what I'm trying to say.
That's really great insight. I think it's great for our listeners to hear that, because I'm sure people are listening who are, looking to take inspiration away from the show, especially from somebody like you. So I think that's really great advice, in this industry.
As artists, you got to be able to express yourselves. And no one should limit anyone from expressing their creativity. Now, there's some people who don't need to even be there because they don't have creativity. But for the people who are artists and are able to say something, I think they need to be given full reign. And there are people, in my career, I have people who try to stop me from doing certain things. And that's one of the issues that I talked about. I mean, we didn't talk about is being out in Hollywood and working with these people, and they try to pimp you. If you don't let them pimp you, they go out of their way to try to blackball you. And those things, it's like, who the hell are you to tell me that if I'm inspired to do something that I can't do it? You understand? Like a guy like Prince is limited from doing stuff. He has to change his name to a symbol because someone wants to stop him. And that's the thing that bothers me. It's like, who the hell are you? That's like the ultimate insult to anybody, is to tell them that they can't express themselves. You understand? And that's part of the problem that I think our industry goes through is there are people who stand and tell you, hey, you'll never work in this town again. Are you fucking kidding me? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the truth. As long as I have a camera and have access to my thing, I'll do it. And that's what made this new wave of talent. I'll go and put my own stuff out. And these guys will do one funny dance in it, and they get 2 million views. And they're an instant celebrity, making millions of dollars,
Right.
I just think there needs to be a balance of that where, people are able to have more of a equal voice that's basically getting the point across. You understand?
Right.
To be able to present everything from, whether you want to talk about faith and Christianity, or if you want to talk about family life. I remember, I'm going to end this on this last one. I remember I did a script, and I brought it to this reputable company, and it was a story about a cop that rescues this woman, and he falls in love with her while he learns her story. And this well-known company told me, sorry, but people don't believe in black love. So they turned the movie down because of the fact that the two characters fall in love and they were black.
What?
As if black people never. I kid you not. I wish I could find. Those emails from back then don't exist. But yeah, that was the note that they gave. We don't believe the story about. But that's it. They want black people to be buffoons, and like
they don't
it is in the music now where.
Yeah.
I kid
that's
you
not
not.
their agenda.
So
that's
that was the note that I got. That was the note that I got. They don't want to show black love on screen. So you prefer it to be like, the way it is. These guys, you want me to believe that a man traveled back in time in the Terminator because he saw a picture. He came to rescue a woman named Sarah Connor, and they have a child together. But you don't want to say that these two characters fell in love?
Wow.
Just because they're black, you must be stupid. So as long as people are thinking that way on the other side, I'm going to be on my side, proving them wrong.
Amazing. I love that
you're
ending it on that note. Yeah.
I have to.
I do.
That's what I'm saying.
So perfect. So perfect about, all of the things that you're about, all of your projects. They have a mission. They have a purpose, including the bullying. And, there's the opioid epidemic. That's the next project. There's many different
yeah. Let's talk about that, too. Yes. So, like I said, right now I'm dedicating my entire career and all of the talents that I have into making a statement. I remember looking at the newspapers and learning how bad hard hit Staten Island was one summer. It's like, I don't know how many people died from opioid addiction. Opioid overdose. And I was like, I know the perfect person to call. Let's talk about this. And I called you, and we went down this path of creating 16, which is a fascinating story about, these young kids, a group of friends. Obviously, you can take us into that world a bit more because I gave you an idea. You just ran with it.
Yeah.
And came up with the most fascinating story.
Well, unfortunately, I have seen a lot of that in my hometown, and it's rampant in the U.S. anyway. But yeah, I had a lot of material because I had a lot of knowledge based on, revolving around that topic. And yeah,
Right.
we were supposed to do a short film, and then we had so much material that we ended up deciding to turn it into a feature film. And then we shot the sizzle for it. And then, we explored turning that into a series, which it looks like that's the path we are most likely going to take. Coronavirus interrupted a little bit of our of our plans, but
no, it's all good.
It's
all good. I actually was talking to somebody today about that project. I'll tell you off air too. It's definitely an interesting journey, and we're going to continue to do that. Like I said, for us, there's a sense of, and that's the important thing, is to make sure that whatever we do, we can't stop. You just always think about that person who tells you no means next, and that person who tells you, hey, you can't do a story about this. I'm like, watch me. That's the key thing. You got to be able to get beyond what these guys are all talking about, because it's not about that. You understand?
Absolutely. I love it. Well, on that note, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your personal stories. And I know that the audience is going to take a lot of insight away from what you had to say today. So thank you so much, Gerald.
No doubt, no doubt. You can call me GB, and those who know me very well, you can call me G motherfucking B.
It's weird for me to call you Gerald, but for the sake of the interview, I figured I should. All right, GB.
Call me
care.
Big Brother.
Thank you. Yeah, you're my big brother.
Thank you very much,
for
Jessica.
20 years now. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.
No, it's been more than 20 years. What are you talking? Yeah.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah, that's good. No doubt, man.
Yep.
So we'll be in touch, girl.
Definitely. I'll talk to you later.
All right, listen.
Thanks.
You can follow me online at all of the platforms at Gerald Barclay, GeraldBarclay, or just Google GB Productions, GEEBEE Productions. And I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Peace.
Thanks so much. Ciao.
Bye-bye.